The streets of New York City hummed with their usual blend of chaos and glamour, a stark contrast of towering skyscrapers, bustling avenues, and unseen lives slipping through the cracks. Beneath the shadow of these grand buildings stood Father John, leaning against the cold, graffiti-covered wall of a crumbling storefront. He held a tattered cardboard sign with shaky handwriting that read, "Anything helps, God bless." Father John wasn't always homeless. Once, he was a devoted priest who led a thriving parish, preaching faith, hope, and love. But tragedy had struck when a devastating fire consumed his church, taking with it not just the physical building, but the very heart of his ministry. Overwhelmed by grief, debt, and an inability to rebuild, he spiraled into despair. Now, at 45, he found himself invisible to the world around him, just another soul surviving on scraps and prayers. Most people ignored him. Some glanced at his sign and quickly looked away, their footsteps quickening. On rare occasions, someone would offer a coin or a nod of sympathy, but today felt different. Across the street, a crowd had gathered outside the iconic Trump Tower. Cameras flashed as sleek black cars lined the curb. And then, emerging through the gold-accented doors, was Donald Trump himself. Father John recognized him immediately. Trump's presence exuded power and confidence, amplified by the swarm of journalists and suited assistants orbiting around him. For a moment, Father John felt a pang of resentment. How could one man command so much wealth and influence while others like him struggled just to survive? But as he watched Trump stride toward the street, an idea formed, a bold one. What if I just ask? Taking a deep breath, Father John stepped forward, his heart pounding. His voice was steady but soft. "Mr. Trump," he called out, "can you give me $1?" The crowd fell silent. The question seemed to slice through the air, stopping Trump in his tracks. Slowly the billionaire turned, his sharp eyes locking onto Father John. There was no hint of mockery or dismissal in his expression, just curiosity. $1? Trump repeated, his voice even and deliberate. Father John nodded, gripping his sign tightly. He expected to be ignored or waved off, as so many had done before. Instead, Trump tilted his head, studying the priest with a scrutiny that felt almost unnerving. After a long pause, Trump's lips curved into a faint smile. "I won't give you $1, Trump said finally, his voice carrying a weight that made the words feel significant. "But I'll give you something better." Before Father John could respond, Trump gestured toward his team. "Meet me here tomorrow at noon," he instructed. "We'll talk then." And with that, Trump climbed into his car and disappeared into the traffic, leaving Father John stunned. The crowd buzzed with murmurs, but he barely heard them. Clutching his sign, he turned and walked back to his usual sleeping spot under a nearby bridge. That night, as he lay on the cold concrete, he stared at the stars peeking through the smoggy sky. For the first time in years, a flicker of hope stirred within him. What could he have meant by something better? Father John stood on the steps of Trump Tower the following afternoon, feeling a mix of anticipation and apprehension. He had spent the night pondering Trump's cryptic words, "I'll give you something better." What could that possibly mean? As the clock struck noon, the crowd outside the building began to stir. Once again, the billionaire appeared, his presence commanding attention. Trump approached Father John, a confident smile playing on his lips. "Father John," he began, his tone firm but not unkind, "I've read about men like you, people who've served others, fallen on hard times and lost their way. But I also see something different in you. Resilience. You asked me for $1 yesterday, but what you need isn't money. What you need is a chance to lead again." Father John blinked, caught off guard. "Lead?" he echoed. Trump nodded. "Yes, lead. Leadership isn't about wealth or power. It's about inspiring others, even when you have nothing yourself. So here's your first challenge. Organize a dinner for 100 homeless people in this city. You have a budget of $1,000 and exactly 2 days to make it happen. Show me you can bring people together, even when the odds are against you." words hit Father John like a wave. A dinner for 100 people, with such a limited budget and time? The task seemed impossible, but he also felt something stir deep within him, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just a challenge, it was an opportunity to reclaim his identity as a servant and leader. As soon as Trump left, Father John set to work. With only 2 days to plan and execute the event, he knew every second mattered. He started by reaching out to a nearby church he had once been associated with before his fall from grace. Knocking on the heavy wooden door, he was greeted by Father Michael, an old friend who looked both surprised and concerned to see him. "John?" Father Michael asked. "It's been years. What brings you here?" Father John hesitated, but then told his story, holding nothing back. He explained the challenge and his desire to prove himself, not just to Trump, but to the God he still served despite his struggles. Father Michael listened intently and, after a long pause, placed a reassuring hand on Father John's shoulder. "You've always had a good heart, John. I'll help you." With Father Michael's support, Father John secured the church hall as the venue. The next step was finding food, volunteers, and guests. He spent hours walking the streets, visiting shelters, and speaking to local businesses, asking for donations of food, utensils, and time. The challenges. Many people were hesitant to help. Some business owners dismissed him outright, unwilling to risk their reputation on a failed priest. Even the homeless he approached were skeptical, asking, "Why should we trust you? What's the catch?" The breakthrough. Father John's unwavering faith and sincerity slowly won people over. He shared his story of losing everything and finding hope in this new opportunity. His authenticity resonated, and soon donations began trickling in. A bakery offered bread, a small restaurant provided soup, and a grocery store donated fresh produce. Volunteers from the local parish stepped forward, offering their time and hands. By the evening of the second day, the church hall had been transformed. Long tables were lined with white cloths, adorned with simple but thoughtful decorations made by the volunteers. Warm trays of food filled the air with inviting aromas. Despite the tight budget, the room radiated a sense of dignity and care. As the homeless began to arrive, Father John greeted each guest personally, offering a handshake or a kind word. For many, it was the first time in years they had been treated with such respect. As the hall filled, the atmosphere shifted from cautious silence to lively conversation and laughter. Father John stood at the front of the room, watching the scene with a mixture of relief and pride. These were people who had been ignored, forgotten, or dismissed by society, and tonight they were seen and valued. Before the meal began, he offered a short prayer. "Lord, we thank you for bringing us together tonight. May this food nourish our bodies, and may this gathering nourish our souls. Let us remember that we are never truly alone, for your love is with us always. Amen." The room erupted into applause, and the dinner commenced. Volunteers moved between the tables, serving plates and refilling drinks. Conversations buzzed as strangers shared their stories, their struggles, and even their hopes. The sense of community was palpable. Unbeknownst to Father John, Donald Trump had arrived quietly and stood at the back of the hall, observing the event. He watched as Father John moved among the guests, his demeanor kind and attentive. It wasn't just the organization of the dinner that impressed Trump. It was the way Father John inspired those around him, making everyone feel like they mattered. After the dinner, as the last guests filed out and the volunteers began to clean up, Trump approached Father John. The priest was visibly tired, but carried a serene expression of fulfillment. "Well done," Trump said simply, his voice cutting through the quiet. Father John turned, startled. "Mr. Trump," he said, "I didn't know you were here." "I like to observe quietly," Trump replied, a faint smile on his face. "You've done more than feed 100 people tonight. You've given them dignity. Leadership isn't about commanding people. It's about inspiring them, even when you have nothing to give but hope." Father John looked around the hall, the truth of Trump's words sinking in. He had begun this challenge feeling lost and inadequate, but tonight he had seen the power of faith, determination, and community. Trump placed a hand on his shoulder. "This was just the beginning. I have another challenge for you, but first, rest. You've earned it." That night, Father John returned to his shelter under the bridge, but this time he didn't feel the weight of failure pressing on him. Instead, he felt a spark, a sense that his life was moving toward something greater. For the first time in years, he prayed not out of desperation, but out of gratitude. The first challenge had been daunting, but it had reignited his sense of purpose, and as he drifted off to sleep, he felt ready to face whatever came next. The morning after the dinner, Father John returned to Trump Tower, his body still aching from the long hours of preparation, but his spirit renewed. The memory of the laughter and warmth shared by the guests gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. When Donald Trump appeared, he greeted Father John with a nod of approval. "You did well, Father," Trump began. "The dinner wasn't just about feeding people. It was about showing them they mattered. Now I want you to take that same energy and apply it to something bigger. Follow me." Trump's car took them to a neglected corner of the Bronx. The area was bleak, an abandoned lot filled with trash, overgrown weeds, and crumbling walls. Broken bottles and rusted metal were scattered across the ground. It was a place no one cared for, a forgotten corner of the city where hope seemed to have disappeared. Trump gestured toward the lot. "This is your next challenge," he said. "I want you to turn this wasteland into something meaningful, clean it up, make it a place people can be proud of. Rally the community, inspire them to help. I'll provide tools, but everything else, volunteers, resources, and vision, is up to you." Father John stared at the lot, his heart sinking. The task seemed insurmountable. How could he convince people to care about a place everyone had given up on? Trump's voice cut through his doubts. "You've shown you can bring people together. Now show me you can give them something to believe in." Father John began his mission by walking through the neighborhood surrounding the lot. He knocked on doors, approached people sitting on their stoops, and visited local businesses. Everywhere he went, he spoke with sincerity, sharing his vision of transforming the abandoned lot into a park, a place where children could play and families could gather. The responses were less than enthusiastic. "Why bother?" one man said, shaking his head. "Nothing ever changes around here." "People have tried to fix that place before," a woman added. "It's a waste of time." Even some homeless individuals, Father John approached, expressed skepticism. "You're just another guy with big promises," one man scoffed. "What's in it for us?" Each rejection stung, but Father John refused to give up. He reminded himself of the dinner he had organized just days before, how he had turned doubt into trust and strangers into allies. He knew it would take time, but he believed the community could be inspired to act. Father John's persistence began to pay off. He visited a local hardware store and spoke with the owner, Mr. Alvarez, who was moved by the priest's determination. "All right, Father," Mr. Alvarez said. "I'll donate some tools, shovels, gloves, garbage bags, but you're going to need people to use them." Encouraged, Father John returned to the neighborhood with renewed energy. This time, he approached families with children, emphasizing the importance of building a safe space for their kids to play. He visited a nearby shelter, asking the residents to join him in creating something they could be proud of. Slowly, people began to come around. A mother of 3 volunteered, saying, "If it's for the kids, I'm in." A group of young men who usually spent their days on the corner agreed to help clear debris. Even the man who had scoffed earlier showed up, muttering, "Might as well do something useful." The cleanup effort began on a bright Saturday morning. Father John arrived at the lot to find a small but diverse group of volunteers waiting for him. Armed with donated tools and garbage bags, they got to work. At first, the task seemed overwhelming. The lot was filled with years of neglect, but as they cleared away the trash and cut back the overgrowth, the space began to transform. Father John worked alongside the volunteers, leading by example. When spirits flagged, he offered words of encouragement. "Every piece of trash we pick up brings us one step closer to something beautiful," he said. "Don't lose sight of what we're building." As the day wore on, more people joined. Residents who had initially been skeptical came out of their homes to help. Local businesses began donating snacks and drinks for the volunteers. A sense of camaraderie grew, and for the first time in years, the neighborhood felt alive with possibility. After 2 weeks of hard work, the transformation was complete. The lot had been turned into a small but vibrant park. Volunteers had planted trees and flowers, installed benches, and painted murals on the surrounding walls. A local carpenter had even built a playset for the children, funded by a donation from a nearby church. On the day of the park's unveiling, Father John stood at the entrance, welcoming residents as they arrived. The once abandoned lot was now filled with laughter and chatter. Children ran across the newly laid grass, parents sat on benches, and neighbors who had once been strangers greeted each other like old friends. Trump arrived later that afternoon, stepping out of his car to survey the scene. He walked through the park, nodding approvingly at the work that had been done. "You've done it again, Father," Trump said, turning to him. "This isn't just a park, it's a symbol. You've shown this community that change is possible when people come together." Father John smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "It wasn't just me," he replied. "It was all of us." Trump's expression grew serious. "You've proven you can inspire and rebuild, but now I have one final challenge for you. This time, it's about creating something lasting." Father John's mind raced. What could be next? Trump didn't elaborate, but the thought of another challenge filled him with both anticipation and determination. Whatever it was, he knew he was ready. That night, Father John returned to his shelter under the bridge, exhausted but deeply fulfilled. The second challenge had tested his ability to rally others and persevere in the face of doubt, but it had also reminded him of the power of community and the importance of hope. As he lay down to rest, he whispered a prayer of gratitude. "Thank you, Lord, for guiding me. I am ready for whatever comes next." The morning after the park's unveiling, Father John met Donald Trump at the now transformed lot. The success of the first 2 challenges had reignited a sense of purpose in him, but he knew Trump's next test would push him even further. Trump stood near the entrance of the park, the early sunlight glinting off the polished brass buttons of his suit. He handed Father John an envelope. Inside was an address in a different part of the city, an empty plot of land surrounded by a struggling neighborhood. "This is your final challenge, Father John," Trump said, his tone serious but encouraging. "I want you to build a church here, not just a place for worship, but a sanctuary for the homeless, a community hub, and a beacon of hope for everyone who needs it." Father John's breath caught in his throat. Building a church wasn't just a test of his leadership, it was a calling that resonated deeply with his faith. But the enormity of the task was undeniable. He had no resources, no congregation, and no starting point other than the barren plot of land. "Why a church?" he asked softly. Trump looked at him, his expression thoughtful. "Because faith is powerful, and a church is more than bricks and mortar. It's a symbol of hope, a place where people find purpose, community, and belief. If anyone can make this happen, it's you." Father John nodded, the weight of the challenge sinking in. "I'll do it," he said firmly, though doubt lingered in the back of his mind. Father John visited the plot that afternoon. It was overgrown with weeds, surrounded by crumbling buildings, and filled with broken glass and debris. The area was eerily quiet, except for the occasional sound of a distant car horn or a dog barking. He knelt on the ground, hands clasped in prayer. "Lord, guide me," he whispered. "I cannot do this alone." As he rose, a single thought echoed in his mind. Start small. He began by visiting nearby homes, introducing himself to the residents, and sharing his vision. He explained that the church wouldn't just be a place of worship, but also a shelter for the homeless, a space for community events, and a hub for providing meals, clothing, and spiritual guidance. At first, Father John encountered skepticism. Many residents had grown disillusioned, believing no one cared about their neighborhood. But as Father John spoke with passion and sincerity, a few began to listen. A local woman named Rosa, who owned a small grocery store, was one of the first to support his vision. "If you're serious about this, Father," she said, "I'll donate what I can, maybe some supplies or snacks for volunteers." Rosa's endorsement gave him a foothold. Inspired, Father John reached out to other local businesses, nearby churches, and even the homeless community he had served during his earlier challenges. Slowly but surely, people began to rally behind the idea. With the land cleared and a growing network of supporters, Father John faced the next challenge, raising funds and resources for construction. He reached out to his former parishioners, explaining his journey and inviting them to contribute. Many, moved by his resilience and faith, donated money, materials, and even labor. A retired architect volunteered to design the church, creating a space that was both beautiful and functional. Construction companies offered discounts on materials, and local tradespeople agreed to work for reduced fees, or even for free. Father John worked tirelessly, overseeing every aspect of the project. He was on site every day, clearing debris, painting walls, and encouraging volunteers. He often led the group in prayer before they began, reminding everyone that their work was not just for a building, but for the people it would serve. The process wasn't without its setbacks. Heavy rains delayed construction, and there were moments when donations ran dry. Father John found himself doubting whether he could complete the project, but each time he prayed, he found renewed strength. One day, as he stood surveying the partially built structure, a group of homeless men approached. They had heard about Father John's previous challenges and wanted to help. "We don't have much," one of them said, "but we can carry bricks, mix cement, or whatever else you need." Their generosity reignited the spirit of the project. With their help, construction moved forward more quickly than ever. After months of hard work, the church was finally completed. Its stained glass windows glowed with vibrant colors, and the bell tower stood tall, a visible reminder of faith and perseverance. The interior was simple but warm, with rows of pews, a small altar, and a kitchen in the back for preparing meals for the homeless. Father John organized a grand opening ceremony to dedicate the church. Word spread quickly, and on the day of the event, hundreds of people gathered, residents, volunteers, former skeptics, and even members of the homeless community who had been instrumental in the project. As the church bells rang for the first time, Father John stepped up to the pulpit. His voice, steady with emotion, echoed through the sanctuary. "This church is not mine," he began. "It belongs to all of us. It is a place for worship, yes, but also a place for refuge, for healing, and for coming together as a community. It stands as proof that when we unite in faith and love, nothing is impossible." The crowd erupted in applause. Many wiped away tears, moved by the transformation not only of the physical space, but also of the people involved. Donald Trump arrived later that afternoon, surveying the church with a rare expression of awe. He shook Father John's hand firmly. "You've exceeded every expectation," he said. "This isn't just a building, it's a legacy. You've proven that faith, leadership, and determination can create something truly extraordinary." Father John smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you for giving me this chance. I couldn't have done it without the people who believed in the vision." Trump handed Father John a small plaque. Inscribed on it were the words, "Faith builds futures." "Hang this in the church," Trump said. "Let it remind everyone of what's possible when we dare to believe." The church quickly became the heart of the community. It offered daily meals, shelter for the homeless, and workshops to help people find jobs. It hosted prayer services, weddings, and community events, fostering a sense of belonging that had been absent for years. Father John continued to lead with humility and faith, knowing that the journey wasn't just about the challenges Trump had set for him, it was about the lives he had touched along the way. The church became a beacon of hope, not just for the neighborhood, but for anyone who heard its story. And every evening as the sun set behind the bell tower, Father John would kneel in prayer, thanking God for guiding him through his darkest days and showing him that with faith, all things are possible. Months had passed since the church's grand opening, and the neighborhood around it had begun to transform. What was once a forgotten corner of the city was now a hub of hope and activity. The church bells rang each morning, a sound that had come to symbolize renewal for the community. Inside, the pews were often filled with people from all walks of life, homeless individuals seeking solace, families celebrating milestones, and neighbors rediscovering the power of unity. Father John sat in the church's small office, a simple room lined with donated books and stacks of notes from ongoing programs. He reflected on the journey that had brought him here, the despair he'd felt when his parish burned, the years spent surviving on the streets, and the challenges Donald Trump had placed before him. What had started as a single request for $1 had turned into a mission far greater than anything Father John could have imagined. Each challenge, organizing the dinner, transforming the abandoned lot into a park and building the church, had tested him in ways that forced him to rediscover his faith, leadership, and resilience. More importantly, it reminded him of the boundless potential of people coming together for a common purpose. The church wasn't just a place for worship. It was a lifeline for the community. It provided daily meals to the homeless, with volunteers from all over the city pitching in to cook and serve. Its community kitchen, funded by the generosity of local businesses and donors, became a space where those in need could find both nourishment and dignity. In the basement, a small but efficient resource center had been established, offering job training, resume workshops, and access to clothing for interviews. The church also partnered with nearby shelters to provide temporary housing and worked with local healthcare providers to offer free medical checkups. What touched Father John most were the stories of transformation. Homeless individuals who had once doubted him now stood side by side with volunteers, helping others as they themselves had been helped. Children who played in the park Father John had helped create often came to the church with their families, bringing life and laughter to the once empty pews. Donald Trump had been following the progress of the church closely. One crisp fall afternoon, he visited unannounced, stepping into the sanctuary just as a group of volunteers was setting up tables for a community dinner. Father John greeted him warmly. "Mr. Trump," he said, "it's good to see you. Welcome." Trump surveyed the bustling activity with an approving nod. "You've done more than I ever imagined, Father. This church isn't just a building, it's a movement." Father John smiled humbly. "It's not just me. This was built by the hands and hearts of everyone who believed in the vision." Trump paused, his voice softening. "When you asked me for $1, I saw something in you, something rare. You've proven that faith and determination can rebuild not just places, but lives. You've given people something no amount of money can buy: hope." Before leaving, Trump handed Father John a second envelope. Inside was a check, a substantial donation for the church's ongoing programs. Along with it was a note: "Faith builds futures, but people like you inspire them." That evening, as Father John walked through the now thriving park and back to the church, he marveled at how far the community had come. He thought about the people who had doubted, the challenges that had seemed impossible, and the countless moments of grace that had carried him through. Returning to the sanctuary, he knelt before the altar, the faint glow of candlelight casting long shadows across the room. His whispered prayer was one of gratitude. "Thank you, Lord, for reminding me of my purpose, for showing me that even in my darkest moments, you were guiding me towards something greater." As he rose, he glanced at the small plaque Trump had given him, now mounted near the entrance of the church. The words inscribed on it, "Faith builds futures," served as a constant reminder of the journey he had undertaken and the mission he would carry forward. Over time, Father John's story spread far beyond the neighborhood. News outlets picked up the tale of the homeless priest who had rebuilt a church with faith and determination, capturing the hearts of people around the world. Donations poured in, enabling the church to expand its outreach programs, including mobile clinics, after-school tutoring, and addiction recovery services. Father John remained humble, always redirecting praise to the community that had worked alongside him. He often reminded people that the church was more than a building. It was a testament to what could be achieved when faith, hope, and action came together. Years later, Father John stood at the altar of the thriving church, looking out at the congregation. It was a diverse group: families, former skeptics, homeless individuals now housed and employed, and new faces drawn by the church's reputation as a place of love and transformation. As the service ended and the congregation dispersed, Father John lingered in the sanctuary, gazing at the cross that hung above the altar. His journey had been long and filled with challenges, but it had led him exactly where he needed to be. He had rebuilt not only a church, but also himself, finding purpose and strength through service to others. And as the bells rang out over the neighborhood, their sound carrying on the breeze, Father John knew that his story and the church's mission would continue to inspire long after he was gone. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What part of Father John's journey resonated with you the most? And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you'll never miss another story that uplifts and inspires. If you enjoyed this heartfelt story of transformation, faith, and redemption, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends and family, and to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories like this. Thank you for watching, and remember, faith and action can create miracles. See you in the next story. The priest didn't know that a camera was watching him and did this